Whereas for Canada, I have to show up at the airport and go to U.S. Customs.
Oh, I did have to do that. Just, but I could do it the next time I arrived in the US. I just did it on arrival.
Yes.
I think German, British, Dutch, Australian, Israeli, South Africa, and a few others.
But I looked into in Canada because Canada is incestuous with the States.
Yeah.
There's no Canadian process. I have to use the U.S. process. And it's a year. I come to the States once or twice a year. I can stand in line.
I also only come to the States once a year, but I really didn't pass standing in line so long.
Yeah, and the questions.
It
depends on the mood of the
Well,
fired up.
With electric, they seem to assume I live here.
Oh,
But the machine broke this time, so I had to go to an actual person. I just got welcome back from them, which is like.
Has anyone here displayed from a Mac to one of these guys, recently?
It should work, he said, hopefully. Maybe you can delegate it to Valerie and he can do it remotely.
I don't think you can do it remotely, right? You have to be hooked up to this wire.
Like your screen sharing, it's a little weird back.
I just am trying to. I don't think that option is afforded here in the device. I just don't know how to get it to even recognize that I have another display.
So is this the device they gave you? No.
This is this is the plug and but maybe I'm not
No,
hooking
there
up to
should
the
be-
right thing. No, there's
That
that
would
one,
be
but that has the
HDMI.
wrong end.
So it's-
These two were sitting next to each other. I mean, I only have USB ports. Yes, that is the nature. But there is this nice USB port connector and things are happening on it.
Try that, and if we can find an HDMI port.
This is like a phone port almost, but it's the only thing that seems to be here. Yeah, we're not supposed to unplug that thing. That's the things for the video. It says you can't use the keyboard or touch pad or touch it in any way.
Trying to trace cables.
That's what I just tried to do. Because they're awkwardly taped all together on the ground, it's a little trickier than it might be otherwise.
You have to open the Taco on your computer and present.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah, no,
There's only two pages.
I have to open Miteco on my computer and
Yes.
present from there. I can.
Send Oki
I
instead.
guess I can go to Miteco. Let's do that. Let's go to IETF 117. And I just never present. Valerie did it the last time. I haven't presented here. And it's
Margaret,
yes?
I will present. Don't
Can
worry.
you do it?
Yes.
Okay, well, if you can do
Just
it,
upload your slides. Just upload your slides to Miteco
did.
and okay.
I did upload my slides, but I mean, I want to present the agenda slides first, the chair slides.
Yes, it's been shared.
Oh,
You can
you're
see.
sharing it right here. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I
So we
wondered
can
where this
start.
was coming from. I couldn't figure it out because it wasn't coming from me. Okay, so let's start the meeting. This is the Radius Extensions Working Group, and if that's not where you meant to be, you find the door back there. I think the first thing up is the agenda, right? The chair slides, the agenda. Can you go to the next slide? So everyone should know that we are working under the Note Well and the IETF Code of Conduct. They concern intellectual property and how we behave during meetings. And you should read those if you haven't already and adhere to them. The chairs of this meeting are Valerie, who's on the screen, and me. And Paul Wouters is the responsible AD, but he's not here today. He had to be in a different meeting this morning. So let's go next slide. There's a blue sheets thing going on today. They say they're collected automatically, but they actually invented this new thing that looks really very much like the old thing. So you can use the QR code though to check yourself in if you didn't already outside the room. Just pass it around now. We need volunteers. We need a Zulip scribe. Can anyone here be the Zulip scribe?
I can check it. No problem. There are very few.
And we need 2 note takers to take notes for the meeting. Q and somebody else. Is there someone else who can take notes? Anybody in the back there willing to take notes for the meeting? Going once. Okay, I don't know. I guess we'll make do with 1, but don't complain if what you said is not correct. Next slide. Okay, so here's the agenda. That was the administrivia right there. The first thing we're going to talk about is the TLS, DTLS encryption for Radius draft. Jan Fred is not here, but may be online to present remotely. Is he here? Oh,
Yes,
there
I'm
he is.
here.
Just arrived. And if you could go to those slides, Valerie, Jan Fred can take over. My slides will be right after his, and they're already up in the thing, but not in the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the Radius DTLS as a proposed standard, you can go to the next slide. What happened so far? We had a working group adoption call for the old version of the draft, which was just an update of Radius TLS, RFC 6614. We had some discussions about merging Radius DTLS into the same document and also add portions of Radius TCP, because there is actually a lot of a spec for Radius that is relevant for Radius TLS in the Radius TCP document. So we did a consensus call on the mailing list just before this IETF, and it was it went through without any negative comments. So I've republished the draft as draft Radius DTLS-Bs, which is a completely new text. So I actually threw out everything that we had with RFC 6614-Bs and just put the 3 documents next to each other. So 6613, 6614, and 7360. And compiled a new text from the relevant sections. Sorry again for the confusion with draft names, replacements. With the draft now in working group document state again, I think now the next version should be draft IETF117-RADEXT something, but that's for after the meeting. Next slide, please. So the status of the document as it is published in the data tracker right now, it's a more or less complete technical spec with a lot of comments. I've put in comments for the sources where I pulled the sections from. I have added some technical questions directly in the document as comments. We'll go through these with Margaret's slides soon. And yeah, basically merged DTLS and TLS at the relevant portions and added TCP and UDP specific sections. The security considerations I've not yet copied to the new document. And as of right now, I've completely left out the design decisions. Next slide, please. So the next steps, of course, republish this as a actual working group draft. And then we have some open questions. The the list there is not complete and also included in Margaret's slides, which come next. Maybe one thing that I did not see in the slides, or I don't remember if it was in the slides, is the question if we should add implementation guidelines and design decisions, or for design decisions, maybe it's enough to just reference the experimental RFC for that. So if you want to know why we did things, then go look there. This is just the technical specification. Yeah, so this is my slide deck, and now I would suggest we switch to Margaret's slide deck for the open issues that need discussing in the working group.
Before we do that, does anyone have any comments on the two questions on the last slide? Whether we should add an implementation guideline section or a design decision section?
Hello, this is Alan. Yeah, I think both those are a good idea. And I'm always in favor of implementation guidelines because it makes life easier for everyone.
Anybody else have an opinion either way? Okay, so that's the only feedback we received was Alan thinks it would be a good idea. So you can proceed as you see fit.
Just for the implementation guidelines or for the design decisions as well?
He's saying both from his seat.
Okay.
I don't think you should include anything that's obviously completely obsolete and dates from 15 years ago. But if there's some useful stuff in there, I think you should bring it over for the design decision stuff. I'm waiting for some new slides to come up. They started to come up and then it went into scan me. Are you still there, Valerie?
I'm here, but there are no your slides yet.
I put them up. They showed up.
It takes some time.
I emailed them to you as well. I didn't change them.
I understand. Okay.
I don't know if you can do it
Just
from
a
there.
moment.
But
Probably it's better to share screen.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Because it takes some time for Meteka to prepare slides for the meeting while they
I just added new ones at the end, and they said they were up there.
Just
I'm having a little bit of confusion because, as you can probably tell, Jan-Fred is not here. He's in a tent somewhere. And so we had some last minute coordination on these issue slides, and let's see if we can get them up.
I'm actually the sound engineer for the camp here, so if I could, I would just jump over and fix the sound issue.
I can walk through them verbally if we have to. The slides were not interesting in any particular way. So I'll start, and Valerie can see if he can get us there. So one of the things I think is important is that wherever the current text is ambiguous or unclear, we want to try to match what existing implementations are doing rather than making up new stuff. So one of the good questions, I think, is what implementations exist for each of these protocols? I don't know that everyone who knows about that is in the room, but what implementations do we know of for Radius TLS? I know that's in FreeRadius. I'm pointing to Alan because he wrote FreeRadius.
Yes. Try and get that a bit taller. Yes.
And we know it's in Radiator.
Radiator, I believe, does TLS. I believe also DTLS, but I don't remember either. It does or they're working on it. FreeRadius does not do DTLS. RADSec proxy does TLS and DTLS. I believe ICE, ACS, whatever Cisco's calling it these days, does both. and NPS does nothing.
Okay. Well, in some cases, we may ask what existing implementations do, and we may have to go out to the list since not everybody's here who represents all of those implementations. But let's continue. So one of the questions that's in the current document is what is mandatory to implement for this specification? We've made one document that covers radius TLS and radius DTLS. We used to have two documents, so you could say you implemented radius TLS or radius DTLS separately. But this specification is going to have to list a mandatory to implement set of things. And the question is it radius TLS, radius DTLS, or both? Thoughts?
Yeah, this is Al again. I don't know that we'd want to make both mandatory, but I believe giving people the option would be best. However, given insecurity of UDP and TLS and all this, I do think there should be a strongly suggest to implement both. It's just it really is difficult to tell people to implement both because there is cost and effort involved, right?
So what do you think it should say? TLS is mandatory, but it's highly recommended to implement both. Do you think it should not say either one is mandatory, in which case we could have two different implementations that implement the same RFC but don't work together at any level?
That sounds bad. Yes.
Yes.
Given that everyone at least has implemented TLS, I would say it's fine to implement, to say TLS is mandatory, and then DTLS is please implement it.
Yeah, I mean, we can put in a strong recommendation to do both. I mean, once you've done TLS, doing DTLS shouldn't be horribly arduous, but
Modulo OpenSSL APIs. I took a look at it a while ago. After slamming my head against the wall, I gave up and did more productive things. Maybe it's more possible now. I know RADSEC proxy does it, so maybe I'll just have to go look at their code and do it.
Okay. So anybody else have any comments on this question?
Q, I also agree that TLS should probably be the mandatory one. It's also probably a bit easier to implement, as you said, with the current SSL libraries. I have the current OpenSSL DTLS implementation is still a bit of a mess.
Any other comments, opinions? So taking a view of the room, let's do a show of hands. We're not voting, just trying to see if there's a preponderance of opinion. I'm not gonna be able to hear people humming in the back as well as these people right here. So humming is not gonna work. So how many people think that the three choices: make TLS mandatory, make DTLS mandatory, or make both mandatory? Because you can't make none mandatory. That doesn't work. So how many people think we should make radius TLS mandatory in this document? How many people think we should make radius DTLS mandatory in this document? How many people think we should make both mandatory in this document? Okay, we had a preponderance of people who said radius TLS with a smaller group that said both. But I would call that consensus to do TLS, which we will check it on the list to see if there are other opinions, because there's obviously people who aren't here. Okay, let's go on to the next issue. That's using a single port for auth and accounting. The current specifications use a single IP port for authentication and accounting packets. Radius TLS uses TCP port 2083. Radius DTLS uses UDP port 2083. And they just send authentication and accounting packets over the same port. do existing implementations match the current specification? As far as I know, yes, unless Alan's going to get up to tell me no, which I'd be very surprised by at this moment in time.
Yeah, this is Alan again. Yeah, everyone does that. I think the choice of 1812 versus 1813 is really historical and makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, well, the radius packets themselves identify themselves as accounting or access requests. So I would have been surprised to learn there were any issues. So we will leave it as is to match the current specification unless anybody has a dissenting opinion that they would like to share. Anybody would vote no if we said, should we leave it as is? Do you want to come up and explain what the issue would be? Was that a hand raise? Oh, sorry. I thought that was a hand raise. No problem. So the proposed resolution stands, which is we'll leave it as is. Did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Aaron, pre-radius. One of the considerations is splitting the traffic, going for a load balancer into different sets of backend servers. It's easier and it's generally appropriate to do this because you don't want your authentication function to be taken down by a sudden spike in accounting packets. So
Okay.
that's the one thing to consider.
I mean, the concern, I guess, would be invalidating existing implementations. But I don't know. We'll do a call in a minute.
So this is Alan again. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I'm not going to disagree with people I like. The reality is any of those choices are site local choices. People can use any UDP port they want. I think in terms of the specification, it makes no sense to mandate different ports for different packets. They're all bits, they're all good, right? Once you accept TLS, it's your choice as to which kind of packet you accept. And there is text in the document which says if you only want to accept authentication and you get accounting, you send a NAC back saying, I do not accept this. And that's the correct way to handle that. And the document discusses this.
All right. So since there has been a dissenting opinion, let's just do a feel in the room. So the two choices are stay with the single port or go to 2 ports. We'd have to get a new port allocation. That's trivial though. How many people think we should stay with the single port like is in the spec right now? Okay. How many people think we should move to 2 ports so that we can do traffic engineering separately for accounting and authentication? Okay, that's a less strong consensus, but I'm still going to call it for single port and we'll check it on the list. Feel free if you want to say more about your opinion to send stuff to the list and try to persuade people, you know. We won't consider it closed until it's been checked on the list. So the next question, the MIB references were deleted from the document, the new document. The rationale was that the MIBs would need to be updated anyway, and they weren't updated, and maybe nobody uses them. I don't know. So the question is, did anyone actually implement the MIBs for Radius TLS? Or the counters from the MIBs, you know, by name, which would still imply they have some value.
This is Alan again. We implement the general radius MIBs. That being said, I think almost all the references to MIBs are outdated. People still use them, but the current fad is Yang and related things versus MIBs. I'm sure Bernard has strong opinions here, but from what I've seen, MIBs don't tend to be widely used, even if they are implemented. So it's one of these things of we might just go, you know what, if nobody cares, we delete it and move on.
Some of the other radius specifications include counters you should implement, conceptual counters, right? And the question I guess I would have is if we remove the MIBs, the reference to the MIBs, should we include conceptual, should TLS requests be counted separately? Should any of this be counted in any way different from, and I don't know the answer to that because I would have to go read all that stuff and I haven't done that. So I think there's the question of should we put something else there instead? And I don't know. I'd have to think.
I don't know. Would have to take us to the list. I mean, there are MIBs for authentication, accounting, IPv4, IPv6, COA, and all this. There aren't, the specific MIBs for TLS. I don't know. There's no good answer here. If you say no, don't do the MIBs, you will get some people going, but we use them. If you say do them, my guess is probably 90% of people will ignore it because they don't use them.
Yeah, I thought it might be more useful to say implement like we did in I think status server does say implement these counters. There's I think at least one other doc I read that said implement counters for these things, and we're not as rigorous as a MIB, but basically you might be able to count on being able to check those things. So let's I don't think this one I don't get the feel that this one is something that we in the room are prepared to answer. So I at least haven't even looked at whether there's anything TLS specific in the MIBs. Has anyone else looked at this and have a confidence in an answer? No? Okay, so we'll discuss this. We'll put this up on the mailing list. Someone saying something? Alex.
Howdy.
You just popped up in my queue here. I guess you were the queue over there.
Hello. I don't know if there's not too much appetite to be implementing any of this and using it in anger. I'm not too sure too much energy should be put into it. Mostly because to try and dictate to someone do this when we're not really all too happy to do it ourselves, it feels a bit of a weird position to take. We've got other things to do. It's I personally like the idea of some sort of standard way of measuring it, but it's one of those things you always wish for, but you don't really get. If you're a Cisco shop, you end up measuring things in one way. If you're a Microsoft shop, you end up measuring things in another way, and it's all not really that interoperable anyway. So a bit of a pipe dream would be nice, but I think it's not something we can do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So we'll discuss this on the list just to see what people think. But right now it's not in the document, so there's not really any wordsmithing we need to do. The next issue was watchdogs. When I said the current text here, I don't mean in our document. I mean the current RFCs contain some conflicting text about watchdogs, and so the new document actually contains some ambiguous text about watchdogs, having brought in sections of the other documents and having just added a flag that this needs to be resolved. What do current implementations do? Use status server for watchdogs for Radius TLS. I think I know of at least one that does. Do we know what anything else does? Anybody here have any experience with the other implementations and what they do for this? And then the question is, the things that do implement DTLS, do they use status server? Do they use DTLS heartbeat, which was another recommendation of the DTLS draft, or something else? And so I'm thinking maybe what we want to do is make status server mandatory for Radius TLS since it exists and is the only candidate, and allow options of the other two for DTLS because they both exist. But that would mean that everyone has to implement DTLS heartbeat. Okay. And if everyone has to implement status server for TLS, maybe they've already got it for DTLS. So maybe that's the best way, but does anyone have any opinions they want to talk about in the room?
I think if we're merging the two documents here, we should probably use the same watchdog system for both. So DTLS heartbeat kind of has to exist, but ignore it for the purposes of this standard. Just go with status server and just ignore what protocol it's actually running on top of.
So you would mandate status server for for DTLS as well, for both of them.
Yes. So then it's just the same everywhere. That's how you check the servers up.
Yeah, I agree. But I'd like some clarification around when these should be sent. Is it sort of a consistent monitoring, or is it only when the far end is suspected to have issues?
This is Alan. To answer that, 2865 says don't send keep alives. I presume, and historically that has been the same case for TLS. However, I believe it's 3539 talks about application layer heartbeats, and that's what the status server is for. So it's if you think the other end is down, then you start pinging it. But if you're normally sending packets, you don't do anything. And if you're not sending it packets, there's no reason to query whether or not it's alive.
I can't directly quote the spec, but it says something like, if you haven't exchanged packets in a certain
Yeah.
period of time, poke it to see if it's still alive.
Yeah, 2865, keep alive considered harmful.
Yeah, Aaron again. So I think that was one of the worst design decisions in the Radius protocol. It literally impacts every proxy implementation negatively. It causes real liveliness issues where you haven't sent packets in a while and then suddenly discover that a subset of your home servers or upstream servers are down. So I really think this would be a good opportunity to change that and recommend that they are sent periodically as a liveliness check, even if no traffic is flowing.
Okay. So what's in the document now cannot possibly be right. And I no disrespect to Janfred, it was taken from different places and it disagrees with itself, right? So would you take the action to write to the list what you think it should say? And then maybe you win because the rest of us will go, that sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. That was Aaron from Free Radius, I believe, from Network Radius. Whatever. That's who volunteered, so we get it in the notes. The next slide. The document is currently making, and I'm not sure if this came from one of the other documents or what, but Janfred could speak up if it didn't. That we use an ID of 0 for status server requests so that their use as a watchdog will not lead to exhaustion of the 256-bit ID space per connection. Do implementations do this today? Okay. So ignore if not. But I wonder if it would actually be better to, or in addition to this, we could recommend the use of Radius 1.1 and like maybe strongly recommend it and, say the use of Radius 1.0 is not recommended, but it's
So this is Alan. Yeah, that use of ID 0 recommendation originally comes from me pointing this out. So Free Radius does this. I believe Radiator also does it, because with 256 IDs, you're stuck, right? It's terrible. I think for the purposes of this document, it would be useful to have a down ref to the Radius 1.1 document and go, hey, if 256 IDs are a problem, there's another document, go read that. However, this document is Radius TLS, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thumbs up from Janfred too. Thank you.
Okay. Any other opinions on this topic? Thoughts? No? Okay, next slide. This one came from Valerie. RFC 9325 provides guidelines on using TLS and DTLS in application protocols. He suggested that this document should reference RFC 9325 and include references to specific sections where appropriate, like about selecting cipher suites. There's a pointer to the document. My suggestion is we should just do it. Is there anybody who has any reason we should not actually be referring to this document, which is sort of provides updated advice on how to use TLS and DTLS in applications? Okay, so we'll call that consensus to just do it unless it doesn't carry on the list. So I think that was the last slide. Yep. So that was it for issues in this document. And it looks like we got a few of them resolved at least, and got a Stuckey to help us resolve one of them. Let's go on to the next topic. If we go back to the agenda, or if you just happen to know what the next topic is, Valerie. It's Radius 1.1.
Hello, this is Alan for Radius 1.1. Next slide. Okay. So we got some minor clarifications based on working group feedback. The flags field was removed. It was sort of a throwaway idea anyways. Additional discussion of error cause. The one open question perhaps is signaling in the error case. So when you're doing ALPN notifications and both ends support it, but the server decides not to do what the client suggests, it can send a TLS alert of no application protocol. If one or the other end doesn't do ALPN, then you simply close the connection and you get a big error of connection is closed because connection is closed. At that point, how the heck do you debug this? So the throwaway comment is Radius does have a protocol error packet, which is meant to be signaling that there's some protocol layer error and not, an error with a particular authentication or accounting packet. It may be useful to send a pre-canned protocol error packet, which is a response packet to a request that was never sent. However, you're going to be closing the connection anyways. And so the theory is you send this thing which looks like a Radius packet, which can then contain a textual reply message, perhaps an error cause attribute with value no application protocol. And when the poor administrator goes, why was my connection closed? He gets this weird thing that vaguely looks like a Radius packet, but which has information about why the connection was closed, as opposed to just open TLS connection, closed TLS connection. What went wrong? Screw you, that's what. I don't see any issue with this, but it is a very weird thing to do. So if anyone has, pitchforks or anything, speak up. Otherwise, it might be useful.
How do you expect current implementations to deal with just receiving this packet out of nowhere?
Yes.
Would they already happen to log it, or would we have to add new code to deal with this packet appearing and logging something to the administrator?
Yes, the point is perhaps, so to answer that question directly, the existing implementations will ignore it. They might complain. They might go, oh my God, I don't know what to do, and close the connection, which the other end is going to do anyways. But the information here is less for the implementation and more for the administrator, who can then go look at things and go.
So you suggest they'd open a packet inspector and see this packet and go, here's what went wrong?
If you don't support ALPN in your existing implementation, that is largely your choice, yes. Because your existing implementations have no way of getting more information out of that TLS connection. They just try TLS and the TLS connection gets closed. And unless you can phone the other administrator and go, why is your system closing the connections? You're left with logs on the local system, and perhaps the local system will log an error going, what the heck is this weird packet I got? At which point you can either, look at the detailed packet traces via Wireshark or something else, but it really is an administrative thing. And this should only happen when you're doing this migration. And to Hecky's point on the list, the recommended configuration for the ALPN servers and clients initially is to set it to allow, which is do it if you can, otherwise just do just do TLS.
Okay.
So it's sort of an ugly solution, but yeah, look at the packet traces. Sorry, you can't update existing implementations.
So this would be sent in the clear outside
No,
the tunnel?
it will be sent as an application data inside the tunnel.
Okay,
The tunnel is not, here's this weird collection of garbage, which might look like a radius packet, but at least is something other than click, the connection goes down.
Yeah, it's just not going to be possible to see in the packet trace because it's going to be encrypted, right? But I mean, you could put some kind of proxy in the middle and see it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of servers have the capability of logging the contents of the TLS connection.
Absolutely.
OpenSSL has this SSL key file where it dumps the TLS parameters to a file, and you can decrypt it later in Wireshark. It sort of rubs me the wrong way to say, yeah, your connection is closed. Why? Get lost, not my problem.
Absolutely. No, it seems like a useful thing. Could it also be used for inbound signaling for congestion control and that sort of?
That would be different. You'd need a new packet type.
Okay.
Margaret.
So I have a nice transition, which is one of the things that this opens up is the possibility that you could log this, but it's kind of weird because you're in some error handling code and you're going to look and you're going to go, oh, this is a special situation. So I almost would like a different packet type in the sense that you could have a packet type that's always logged and that's,
So
you could look for.
The issue here is working with existing TLS implementations that don't do ALPN. And you can define a new packet type, but then nobody knows what it is, right? And then you have to go look. Whereas at least the protocol error packet type exists. People should at least be aware of this. And the question is what to do. You can simply send a textual string, hey, please implement ALPN, and people look at it and see it's ASCII text. The connection is going to be closed anyways, so it almost doesn't matter what you send, but you should send something that people can understand. And sort of the initial straw man is protocol error that vaguely looks like a radius packet.
So you'd basically implement something that just whenever it gets a protocol error, prints out the error cause somewhere in the logs and hopes somebody comes along and looks at it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, existing implementations at least will go, I got a packet that I have no idea what to do with. And at least then when the connection is closed, right, the administrators can get something other than TLS connection closed. Instead, they get weird packet, TLS connection closed. Now they scratch their heads and go, what the heck is this? They go look at the weird packet and it says, please implement ALPN, error cause, ALPN not implemented. Oh, now I know what to do. As opposed to stuff didn't work. Why? Too bad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it'd be nice to get any indication back as opposed to no indication back. So
yeah,
if like you think people will implement this and wouldn't implement a different packet type, I guess.
And the thing
better,
is, yeah,
but
this can be a pre-canned response, right? It can be anything because protocol error is a response packet. You can't sign it because you don't have any shared secret. You can't sign it. So you might as well go, here's a pre-canned series of bytes that you send back going, this is radius. It vaguely looks like a radius packet. We have an error cause attribute with values. They can look at it and go, I guess, your protocol decoders will decode this as radius, go, this packet isn't signed, but hey, look, there's a reply message with text that you can read and an error cause. And now you go, oh, I know what to do to fix it. It's the least disgusting of the disgusting alternatives. And I would rather have something weird and bizarre than connection got closed. Too bad, get lost.
yeah, well, I mean, nothing at all is very problematic. I mean, I've been worried actually about the whole radius TLS thing because of the number of things that go wrong that I have to get on, in TCP dump to figure out. So I think one of the things implementations are going to have to do is log more when things just, it's not like, I don't know what this is, throw it out. It's like, right before you throw something out, say what you threw out and why.
So on that note, years ago, I worked at a company where one of the engineers got tasked to remove all of the fatal errors, which said, "What the hell?" and replace them with actual descriptive errors as to what happened and why. Because what the hell is not actionable. So yeah.
One final query. I'm wondering why not use TLS error and define a new error type? It would seem to be more in the spirit of using TLS. I don't know that you can do that. Maybe trolling through the OpenSSL APIs, it's not always trivial. Oh yeah, I bet they don't support adding it. But...
Yeah, right. So
we had custom code to do it though.
There
Alex
is,
has it for T.
Yeah, there is a OpenSSL supports a hello callback, and you can send random alerts in that case. So you could send some kind of different alert based on Hecky's comments. If the client doesn't implement ALPN at all, and the server does, the server can intercept the hello, client hello, via a callback and go, hey, rather than just closing the connection, it sends a no application protocol alert 120. The ALPN RFC doesn't say you can do this, but it seems to be possible. Some other TLS implementations, according to Hecky, don't do that. But it's worth suggesting, if you have this error, please send it back somehow magically. If not, if you can't do it at the TLS layer, your only remaining option is application data.
Yeah, it seems like something should be investigated because, I mean, if you're running for a TLS proxy or something, you're more likely to get the TLS errors logged. And
yeah,
you'll see it.
Yeah, it would be much preferable to do this in the TLS layer. So we know at least with OpenSSL, if the server supports ALPN and the client doesn't, it can send a protocol error, application error. If the client wants to do ALPN and the server doesn't, it's not clear exactly how you would intercept that server hello and have the client send an error back. So,
Okay, Alex is in the queue.
Yep.
I was literally just what Alan said, because that was the bit on the list I didn't even think about was it's easy to deal with when the client doesn't support the ALPN. The problem is when the server doesn't support it and the client the server thinks there's everything's peachy, whilst the client's going, yeah, I'm not going to be doing this. And its only option at that point is close the connection. But maybe you can send up a request that's kind of reply that gets the server rather upset and grumpy. So explode loudly with an error message, hopefully, saying unexpected packet. I think a bunch of things do that already.
Another thing I'd like to say on TLS errors is they're just numerical. If the one advantage of the protocol errors thing is you could put ASCII in there. When OpenSSL encounters a TLS alert, it just says like alert 46. That's helpful. No clue what happened there. And then I have to go look up what is alert 46. Oh, this could be one of 3 things. Oh, that's really helpful. So maybe we should just put some ASCII somewhere instead and hope that the ASCII gets logged instead of random numbers, which mean absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Okay. Don't remember if there's another slide. Valerie, next slide, perhaps, if there is one. Yeah. So this was written, I guess, Friday. There have been comments on the list since then. Margaret, among other people. One point, I think it was that. Was it not? I'm thinking about something else.
I think you're thinking about
I'm thinking about something else. Ignore my last
the
comment.
the other document.
Yes, it was Hecky's comments that were there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm working on updating that and double checking the implementations, but it's sort of 99% done at this point. And I think there's very little dissension and there's a lot of agreement, which is very positive. So next slide, and I think that's it.
I mean, the only comment I made on it was next time you publish it as a working group document name, because we may be ready to last call it and it should have a working group document name.
Okay.
Just so there's no ambiguity. about, I don't know, it's easier to find working group documents than it is to find other documents vaguely associated with the working group.
Okay, I think that's it, Valerie. The next slide is just.
It's the last slide.
Okay, so I think we're done with that one. What's the next presentation? TLS PSK.
Valerie is sharing. There you go.
Yes, the TLS PSK again. Not much has happened since the last IETF. We can do the next slide. I think we're pretty close to getting it published. There have been a couple of minor comments. I need to issue a revision as a working group document, which I'll do after the meeting. But I think there's largely violent agreement on what to do. Fabian had some comments on the mailing list, which I'll address, but they're largely wordsmithing and they're not substantive technical changes. So unless there's violent disagreement.
I think they did point out something important that you should look through, which is that you sometimes use wording that's ambiguous about whether you're talking about the original shared secrets or the pre-shared keys. And I think you just need to walk through it and make sure you're clear each time which one you're talking about.
Yeah. So I'll take a pass through that, do that, and then issue a new working group document based on that. And I think then we're pretty close to last call. So I don't think there have been substantial disagreements. Hearing none, we can move on.
Okay, what's next, Valerie? I think it's reverse COA.
Yes. So not much to be said here. The document has expired. There haven't been much in the way of discussion on it. We can go to the next slide, Valerie. For people who don't remember, the issue is when someone comes online, the Radius client may be behind a NAT. Now, how do you get COA packets to them? You're screwed. You can't. It's impossible. However, if you have a TLS connection, it's TLS. All the application data is good. Bits are bits. It doesn't matter. Just send the COA packets down the TLS connection. There's a couple of minor implementation issues. There's some good discussion 8 months or so ago before London, I think. And there's not much been done since then. So no comments, no feedback. It's shipping. Aruba supports it. Cisco supports it. FreeRadio supports it as a special build. So it's not on by default, I believe. There really doesn't seem to be much in the way of implementation issues. It's really send packets down a TLS connection and get the replies. The document has a little bit of discussion about what to do for proxying versus the visited server that gets it. So when you proxy it, you proxy these packets based on operator name and not on username. And the packets end up at the visited network, and the visited network magically knows how to send them to the right NAS. How does it know that? It's magic. It's all local network stuff. And there's a couple of suggestions, including, I believe it's original NAS or operator NAS identifier, but it's all pretty simple and pretty straightforward. And the only substantive comment I got on this was from the open roaming people who said, hey, they have prefix 4 for operator name that they use for proxying, and they would like to use that too. So I just need to update the document going, yes, because it refers to realms in operator name, but it needs to say anything else you want to do in there is valid and works too. So the question is, it's shipping, it's working, there's not a lot of comments. Do we want to make this a working group document and push it out the door? I need to update, issue a new revision either way.
Does anyone have any comments on the document in general? Does anyone have any objection or concerns to us making a working group last call on this document after it's revivified and doing it on the mailing list? Okay, seeing no objection, that'll be the plan. So.
Next topic, I think, yeah, this is all just, sorry. This is all what I said. So I think we can go to the next document, which the next topic.
I think the next topic is deprecating, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, me again. So yes, this document again is mostly done. If we go to the next slide. This is the one where Margaret had some comments, which are on point, I think. The current draft of the document discusses why UDP and TCP are insecure transports and why you should use TLS or DTLS. It needs a section added, which is how to make UDP and TCP more secure. So if you're going to be using them, for example, don't send user password in packets across random proxying environments because everyone can see the clear text password. Use, chat, pat, eat, whatever. There's a bunch of additional issues which are how to get the existing insecure transports as secure as possible. And that's really 8 or 10 more paragraphs. But I don't think that's very contentious. I just summarize what's been said on the list and add a bit of explanatory text. And again, I think this document is largely done. However, it really needs to be published after 6614-biz because arguably you can't deprecate one protocol until you have another one to replace it. And the current standard of 6614 is experimental, not standard.
So currently, we have, we don't have this as a working group document yet. So I think one question would be whether people think it's time to do a working group last call on the document. And I think the feedback has been my stuff, which is, I know a little tangential to the document. And in addition to what Alan said, has to do a little bit with we're nailing down the security for hop to hop, and we're not pointing out that that still leaves a security problem potentially at the hops. And Alan and I have talked about it a bunch. I'm pretty sure we can come up with text that he feels belongs in the document and I feel satisfies my concerns. So I'm not worried that's going to block anything. Does anybody think want to comment at all on whether they think this is ready to become a working group work item? How many people in this room have read this document? Okay, kind of weak, but so I think we'll do the same thing with this one, which is put it out on the list for a working group work item after the meeting, and hopefully we can get both of these onto the. I mean, they're the only candidates for items that are explicitly listed in our charter. So, it's unlikely we're suddenly going to decide we hate them, but let's put it out on the list.
Okay, I think that's it then.
Yes, well done.
Good job.
And I think Shri, you're up next.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, this is a presentation on it's a new topic, radius attributes for 5G authentication. So next slide, please. Next slide.
I'm not doing them.
Yes,
Valerie's doing them. Just speak into the
Valerie,
mic and
okay,
he'll hear you.
yeah, thanks, Valerie. So some context, if you look at private 5G is getting deployed in enterprise environments. So enterprise environments, if you already know, they're mature architectures. There's multi-access support, there's Ethernet, there's Wi-Fi. There's a lot of existing gear, including, authentication functions, policy functions, right, and management infrastructure. Now the question is, when we bring in private 5G into these environments, I think there are multiple ways of looking at it. It ships in the night. Packet core comes with its own authentication function, its own mobility management function and everything. Whereas the existing elements for managing Ethernet and Wi-Fi will continue to stay the same way. That's a perfectly valid way of deploying 5G. But from the enterprise IT point of view, they want some correlation. Right? If I'm managing Wi-Fi access and 5G access, I want to be able to understand, like, essentially correlate. If a device, let's say I come with my handset, it has both Wi-Fi and 5G. It may be connected to a Wi-Fi access point or a private 5G G node B. The enterprise IT point of view, they should be able to correlate that, yeah, this is the same guy. The policy that I've defined for this user, irrespective of which access it comes in, I should be able to enforce it. That's the higher goal here, right? Now, in that sense, I think the larger objective is that if there are some existing elements, why don't we make use of them, right? One being the radius server. That's the context here. Next slide, please. Yeah, if you look at the 5G system architecture, this is again, it's a carrier-centric. These are systems that are designed for operators, right? Now, that world is now colliding with enterprise world, where if you look at the bottom picture with Wi-Fi, right? Even with .1x Ethernet, right? Essentially, there's a client, there's an access point or a switch, and then there's a AAA server, radius server somewhere there. Now, our idea is, like, if AAA already supports EAP TLS, EAP TLS, all the authentication methods, why don't we add support for 5G ACA? Just a simple algorithm. That way we can use the same function. I can define my policies. I can define what are the user credentials there. I'll be able to authenticate the user. That's the context here. That's the goal. Next slide, please. Valerie. So if you look at the idea, the system, and there's enterprise network, there's an access point, there's a G node B, there's a AAA server. Now, enterprise IT will define, like today, how they configure certs or other credentials in AAA, along with other policy attributes. They'll be able to define a 5G, the using parameters. That way, if our device comes in on left side or on the right side, we'll be able to authenticate the device, pretty much generate the keys or whatever is needed. But again, without impacting what happens, I think it needs to be, we need to recognize that, understand that the interface is truly between the AAA and an AMF function, which not on the UE to the station to the AMF, that interface is untouched. Largely, if you define a new attributes and if we support the method on the AAA side, we'll be able to authenticate the device. Next slide, please, Valerie. This is a summary of the proposal. Support is for a new method, the 5G ACA method. It's just a simple algorithm. Takes certain parameters and spits out few parameters that we need to be, that are used for the key construction and other things. So what we define, or like essentially saying, define these attributes. This is the algorithm is published, right? And we even did in Cisco, we did an implementation on a free radius, maybe a year, 2 years back. So that's, we were able to evaluate this. Next slide, please. Simple, message exchange, the UE, AMF, and then there's a radius server, right? On the UE side, there's a SIM, the USIM, and whatever the parameters that are, the SUKI is the concealed identifier. That SUKI or SUPI is what is equivalent to the IMSI equivalent identifier is SUPI in 5G, but when it's encrypted, it's become SUKI, concealed identifier. So these are the larger flow, or simple. I think the focus here is largely on the right hand side on the a radius server. Essentially, when an access request comes from a node AMF, right? I think for this we need to define a new NAS port type. Today, the number of NAS port types supported for Wi-Fi and other things. We define a new NAS port type for 5G, and in the access request, there are certain attributes. How we use those attributes for generating the responses and what we send and how the AMF will send it back. Again, the interface between the UE and AMF is untouched. Here, the focus is largely between what happens between the AMF and the radius. So these are a higher level call flow, and I think next slide, please. These are the list of attributes that we want to be able to define. More 5G RAND. That's then explanation is provided in the draft and also here. That's the next slide, please. Next steps. I think we still have a few things to improve in the spec. We haven't. There's some resync related things. If the UE goes out of sync, there's a way to. We need to take care of a few things. It's not done yet, but that's one thing. We mainly want some feedback from the working group. I think we see value. Cisco, we do have a radius server. We do see value. If we can support multiple access technology, if you can support Wi-Fi and other access technologies, why not add a simple algorithm and support another access type? That's the we see value in here. Appreciate any feedback from the working group. What do you think?
So one question I have in complete ignorance of the answer is how does this relate to the existing EAP AKA stuff? And I mean, it doesn't seem to mention it or reference it, so I don't know why you need something different at the radius level instead of using that stuff.
Yeah, like in 4G and 5G, there are multiple methods that are supported, E-based and non-E-based. Margaret, that's a good question, by the way. We should have added some text. E-based is what, that's one of the method. And in 4G, if you look at this, something called EPS ACA. And yeah, that's, so there's a different method. So E-based and non-E-based methods. So,
but in 5G, there's not?
5G also there's E-based support. That's also there. But that's not the default. Most is 5G ACA, the most obvious method. That's the default method that's supported. 5G ACA. Yeah, not Alan. Yes.
Yeah, this is Alan. The document looks pretty clear. A couple of minor comments. I'd remove the ASCII art. Just refer to the data types in 8044. Things will work automatically. The other thing is you probably want to require that message authenticator is in every packet. Otherwise, they can be trivially spoofed.
Absolutely.
And I guess the other security question is these attributes are all sent in the clear. Is there any issue if someone who can watch the UDP packets sees that, right? Or do we want to go, hey, it doesn't matter so much if the proxies see it, but over UDP, we probably want to encrypt the random numbers or something, just so people can't see it.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I have to.
We need to secure the method. So we didn't have the time to add the security considerations. We need to work on that, but that's absolutely very good. Thank you so much.
Hey, Aaron from FreeRadius. Just to be clear, this is an enterprise running a private 5G network for their sites. Okay, because yeah, the KI and the OPSI are not usually available. Okay, makes sense.
Thank you so much.
Dan Harkins. So getting back to Margaret's question about doing EAP. So you're saying that there's be now two ways to do authentication, the EAP based and then this with all these attributes. I think that's kind of a bad idea. Having two ways to do the same thing is usually not a good idea.
Right. Dan, thanks for the question. So E-based authentication, 3GPP supports multiple authentication methods, right? E-based and non-E-based. I think what we are focusing on is like, the gap is with respect to non-E based method. So this approach is for non-E based approach.
I also have a different comment on the document. It relates a little bit to the security stuff and everything, which is that we can comment on very little of this document with the expertise of this working group because, anybody can define a radius attribute. I could define one today. I'll call it the red hair radius attribute, and it should be marked as yes if the person who sent the thing has red hair. Okay, that's not really useful, right? And understanding how these are going to be used in some authentication method that is defined in 5G is kind of outside the scope of this working group. Maybe not the minds of every person in this working group, but one of the things that I would wonder is, has the 5G, the 3GPP people asked for this document? There's a complex liaison agreement between the IETF and them where they asked for documents related to their work, and they've already proofed all this. Like, I can't tell you whether the statements you made, they probably are accurate. I know who you are, but I couldn't tell you that the statements you made about 5G are accurate because I don't have that expertise. And I wonder where is this document in that greater collaboration system?
That's a good question, Margaret. I think let me start with the second part of your question, right? So it's a process. Like, as part of this, we definitely need to get reviews from 3GPP community as well. But I think the key thing is why slightly it's entering the IETF realm is for the following reasons, right? And Radius server today supports different, like I said, different access technologies. Now, if private 5G is coming into their world, they'll have to implement this. So having an IETF document will help. I think that's one point, right? But from the reviews point of view, I think today we ship Radius servers, right? In that we support all of these access technologies. Why not, from a product point of view, we want to be able to implement one more method, right? So in that sense, IETF document will help. Now, from the expertise point of view, there's nothing that 5G constructs we are touching. Like I said, UE to AMF untouched, right? There's an authentication, there's an algorithm. It takes certain inputs, it generates certain inputs. Sure, anybody with some reasonable security expertise will be able to say that, yeah, these vectors, when they are sent to the other side for construction, they have to be protected. I think at the end of Alan's question is a key point here. All of this, at the end of the day, which of these are, how you are constructing is a well-defined algorithm that we can even put a source code, little few hundred lines or put 100 lines of whatever. Right? That's the easy point. Second part is, in all of this is a secure thing. Make sure somebody on transit intercepting the wire should not be able to read that. That's all to this. That's the level of expertise we need. But for doing it the right way, we will get reviews from the different.
Yeah, well, I think there's two different possibilities going on here, and I'm having trouble understanding which one this is. If this is something Cisco wants to put in their products, obviously Cisco knows how to do private attributes and does so all the time. Okay. If this is something the 3G wants to add to their specifications, then I think we need to make sure. I don't even know. Last time I knew it was Thomas Narton, but I don't think he's been doing it for a while. Do we even know who the current 3GPP liaison is? Is it you?
Charles Eccles.
Who?
Charles Eckel.
Charles Eckel. Okay. So I think one of the things we want to do is talk to him and understand where this document fits into 3G's plans and whether this is, I don't fail to support it either way, but whether this is something 3G wants, in which case it would make sense to put the 3G name and stuff in the options, or whether this is something, Cisco's going to offer in a product that's outside of the realm of 3G, in which case I'm not sure that's as clear. So I don't want us to get in a situation where it appears that we're defining something for 3G that 3G hasn't asked for. That's.
Yeah, I think quick response to that, right, Margaret? I think it's not just a Cisco's problem. Sure, we are in that space, but so is HPE and many other vendors who ship products in this. Right?
Yeah,
It's in the interest of the community, the public.
right. But I think if 3G asks for it, we could put 3G's name on it. If 3G doesn't ask for it, I think we should be very careful not to put 3G's name on
I
it.
understand. Mark.
Yeah, so I think in the annex of the draft, we've got the comparison. So as 3G would say you do 12 HTTP2 REST calls to register on your network. And so what we're saying for private enterprises, do they want to do the 12 REST calls, or is there a way to simplify and align with existing enterprises? And this isn't just, a Cisco problem. I think it's an industry problem. And the issue is yes, we could all do this with our own VSAs, but do we want to try and move the industry forward in an interoperable way? Hence the draft.
Yeah, I don't get to decide this kind of stuff. This draft isn't even in our charter. I'll talk to Paul because I assume this draft is being proposed to him at this point. Is that to make, I just think we need to make sure that Charles Eccles and whatever AD is looking at this draft are talking to each other. And I can send that information up my side. Maybe you guys can send that information up the 5G side, because I don't think we should publish anything that says this is how you use 5G, blah, 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 that the 3GPP partnership hasn't asked for, or at least said that's something they support.
Thanks, Margaret. Thanks.
I think that's it for our agenda. Does anyone have any other issues or other business they want to discuss today? Anything you want to revisit from the earlier part of the meeting that we didn't spend enough time on? Okay, well, I guess we are done for today, and we will take the actions on the list that were discussed and get out some notes and some confirmations. On behalf of the chairs, I'll apologize for us not getting the confirmation out in the last meeting in a timely manner. We'll try to do better this time. Thank you.
I would like that. Doesn't just raise it joy. One of the issues that we said saying that we're employing these. So this is a historical issue.
Yes, I'm aware of how yes.
Nobody wanted to do it.
I can understand. I can understand why that document exists. I have a somewhat decent knowledge of what I've got both of them with facts. So it makes sense. It's not the this is